Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship HFY Guardian, watching the massive alien fleet appear on his screens like dark clouds against the stars. The ships were huge, each one 3 times larger than Earth's biggest warship, and there were 200 of them floating at the edge of the solar system like waiting predators. "Sir, we're getting a transmission from the lead ship," said Lieutenant Bobby Chun, his voice tight with worry. The young communications officer had never seen anything like this before, and his hands shook as he worked at his control panel. Jake nodded and straightened his uniform. He had served in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years, fighting pirates and rebels, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Put it through to all Earth stations, he ordered. "Let everyone hear what they have to say." The main screen flickered and showed a tall alien creature with gray skin and 4 arms. Its eyes were completely black, and when it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical. "I am War Commander Zex of the Zephyrian Collective," the alien said. "We have conquered 17 star systems and added their worlds to our empire. Now we claim this system and all its planets." The alien paused and seemed to look directly at Jake through the screen. "Your species will surrender within 72 hours. All military forces will lay down their weapons and prepare for processing. Your leaders will report to our ships for instruction. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your world." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest, but he kept his face calm. His crew was watching him, waiting for orders, and he knew that panic would spread quickly if he showed fear. "Send a message to Admiral Carter at Earth Command," Jake said quietly. "Tell him the Zephyrians are here, and they want us to surrender in 3 days on Luna Station." Dr. Lisa Park was studying the alien ships through the most powerful telescope humanity had ever built. She had been tracking their approach for the past 6 hours, taking measurements and trying to understand their technology. The ships moved in perfect formation, never changing course or speed, like a machine that had done this many times before. "They're so confident," she whispered to herself as she watched the fleet. Her assistant, Dr. Mike Stevens, stood beside her, equally fascinated by what they were seeing. "Look at how they just sit there," Mike said, pointing at the screen. "They're not even trying to hide or protect themselves. They think we're so weak that we can't hurt them." Lisa nodded and made notes on her tablet. She had spent her whole career studying alien life forms, but these were the first intelligent aliens humanity had ever encountered, and they had come to conquer Earth, not to make friends. "Get me every detail about those ships," she told Mike. "I want to know how they're built, what powers them, and most importantly, how we can fight them." The Admiral is going to ask for our report in a few hours in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. Admiral Ben Carter sat at a huge table surrounded by Earth's military leaders. The room was filled with screens showing the alien fleet, and everyone was talking at once. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to negotiate, and a few suggested hiding until the aliens left. "Quiet," Admiral Carter said, and the room fell silent. He was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes, but his voice still carried the authority of someone who had commanded soldiers for 40 years. "We all know why we're here. The aliens want us to surrender, and we have 3 days to decide." General Kate Ross, a tough woman who commanded Earth's planetary defense systems, stood up. "We can't surrender," she said firmly. "If we give up without a fight, humanity will become slaves. We have to try, even if we don't win." "But look at their ships," said Colonel Dave Wilson, pointing at the screens. "They're huge, and there are so many of them. Our entire fleet is maybe 50 ships, and theirs are much more advanced." Admiral Carter raised his hand for silence. "I've been thinking about this since we first detected their ships," he said. "They expect us to be scared. They expect us to panic and make mistakes. They've done this before, and they think they know exactly what will happen." He stood up and walked to the main screen, looking at the alien fleet. "But they don't know humans. They don't know how we think or how we fight when someone tries to take our home. We don't just lie down and die. We get creative." The Admiral turned back to his officers. "I'm activating Protocol 7. He announced. Several people gasped, because Protocol 7 was Earth's most secret military plan, something that had been prepared for exactly this situation. "Send the message to every military base. Every ship and every colony, Admiral Carter ordered, tell them to begin preparation for extended resistance operations. The aliens think they're dealing with a primitive species, but they're about to learn what humans do when someone threatens our families. Back on the EDS Guardian, Jake Morrison received the Admiral's orders and smiled. Grimly, he had helped design Protocol 7 during his time at the War College. And he knew it would surprise the aliens. The plan didn't rely on having better ships or bigger weapons. Instead, it used humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt and survive no matter what. Bobby, send a message to the Zephyrian commander. Jake ordered, tell him we need more time to consider his offer. Tell him our leaders are discussing surrender terms. Lieutenant Chun looked confused. But sir, we're not really surrendering, are we? Jake shook his head. No, Bobby, we're not surrendering, we're buying time. And we're making them think we're weak and scared when they attack. They'll expect us to run or hide, but humans don't run when someone tries to take our home. We fight back. And we fight smart. The young lieutenant smiled and began typing the message as Jake watched the alien fleet on his screens. He felt a cold anger building in his chest. The Zephyrians had made a terrible mistake. They thought they could conquer humanity because they had bigger ships and better weapons, but they had never fought humans before, and they had no idea what they were about to face. The next few days would teach them that conquering Earth would be much harder than they thought. In fact, Jake realized with grim satisfaction they might not last long at all. The 72 hours passed like a nightmare, and when the deadline arrived, the Zephyrian fleet moved toward Earth with deadly purpose. War Commander Zex had expected humanity to surrender, but instead he received silence from the planet below. His ships detected no white flags, no messages of defeat, only the quiet hum of a world that seemed to be waiting. Begin the first wave. Zex ordered from his command ship, land our forces in the major population centers and crush any resistance. The humans will learn what happens when they defy the collective. Thousands of small attack ships poured from the main fleet like angry insects racing toward Earth's atmosphere. The Zephyrians had done this 17 times before, and they knew exactly how it would work. The primitive species would panic. Their military would collapse, and within days the conquest would be complete. But Colonel Ryan Hayes was waiting in the ruins of downtown New York, and he was not panicking. Instead, he was excited. The former Marine had spent the last 3 days preparing his fighters for urban warfare, turning the city into a maze of traps and ambush points. Remember, they expect us to fight like their other enemies, Ryan told his squad over the radio, but we're not like anyone they've fought before. We don't fight fair, and we don't give up. Let them come into our city, and we'll show them what street fighting really means. The first Zephyrian dropships landed in Times Square, their massive hulls crushing cars and sending debris flying everywhere. The alien soldiers that emerged were tall and strong, carrying energy weapons that could cut through steel. Their armor was thick and black, and they moved with the confidence of warriors who had never lost a battle. But Ryan and his fighters were hidden in the buildings above. Watching and waiting, the Zephyrians formed neat lines and began marching down the street just like they had done on 17 other worlds. They expected the humans to either run away or charge at them with primitive weapons instead. They got something completely different. The first explosion came from a manhole cover beneath the alien formation. Ryan had filled the sewers with homemade bombs, and when they went off, the street collapsed and swallowed half the alien squad. The survivors looked around in confusion, not understanding what had happened. Then the windows above them erupted with gunfire. But it wasn't the random shooting of panicked civilians. Ryan's fighters had studied the aliens for 3 days, and they knew exactly where to aim. Their bullets struck the weak points in the alien armor, the joints and seams that the Zephyrians thought were too small to hit. They're not supposed to be this organized, one alien soldier shouted into his radio. Intelligence said they were primitive warriors. But Ryan was just getting started. His fighters disappeared into the buildings like ghosts, moving through secret passages and hidden tunnels that the aliens couldn't follow. The Zephyrians tried to chase them, but they found themselves lost in a maze of broken glass and collapsed walls. Meanwhile, in a secret laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Amy Chun was working on something that would change everything. She had been studying the few pieces of Zephyrian technology that Earth's satellites had managed to scan, and she had discovered something interesting. Their energy weapons work on a very specific frequency, she explained to her assistant, Dr. Tom Clark. If we can build devices that interfere with that frequency, we might be able to make their guns stop working. Tom looked at the equations on Amy's computer screen. But how do we get close enough to use something like that the aliens will shoot us before we can get near them? Amy smiled and held up a small device that looked like a radio. We don't have to get close, she said. We just have to hide these in the right places and turn them on when the aliens walk by. Watch this. She activated the device and pointed it at a captured Zephyrian weapon on her lab table. The alien gun flickered and went dark. Completely useless, Amy's device had jammed the energy flow, turning the advanced weapon into nothing more than an expensive piece of metal. Get this design to every resistance cell on Earth, Amy ordered, and tell them to build as many as they can. We're going to turn the aliens' own technology against them. In the skies above Australia, Commander Alex Stone was leading a squadron of modified crop dusters against a formation of Zephyrian fighters. The aliens expected to face advanced military jets, but instead they found themselves being attacked by small, agile aircraft that moved like nothing they had ever seen. These humans are insane, the Zephyrian pilot leader reported to his commander. They're using farming equipment as weapons, and they're actually hitting us. Alex grinned as he rolled his tiny plane between two alien fighters. His aircraft was old and slow, but it was also small and hard to hit. The Zephyrians kept missing him with their powerful weapons, while he peppered their ships with machine gun fire. That's the problem with you aliens, Alex said into his radio, knowing the enemies could hear him. You think big and fancy always wins, but sometimes small and smart is better. The battle in Australia became a disaster for the Zephyrians. Alex's squadron used the landscape to their advantage. Hiding behind mountains and diving through valleys, the alien fighters were fast and powerful, but they couldn't maneuver in the tight spaces where the humans led them down in the Australian desert. Maria Santos was proving that civilians could fight just as well as soldiers. The former mining engineer had turned her knowledge of explosives into a deadly weapon against the invaders. She had spent days planting bombs along the routes where the alien ground forces would advance. They move in straight lines. She explained to her volunteer fighters, they don't scout ahead or check for traps, they just march forward like robots, and that makes them easy targets when the Zephyrian ground forces entered the desert. Maria's traps were waiting. The aliens expected to cross empty land and reach the cities quickly. Instead, they found themselves walking into a series of carefully planned ambush. The first explosion destroyed 3 alien vehicles and blocked the road. The Zephyrians stopped and tried to go around, but Maria had anticipated that 2 more bombs went off, creating a wall of fire that trapped the alien column in the middle of the desert. Now they're stuck, Maria said with satisfaction, and the real fun begins. Her fighters emerged from hidden positions in the rocks and sand, attacking the confused aliens from every direction. The Zephyrians tried to form defensive lines, but the humans disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, only to attack again from somewhere else. By the end of the first day, War Commander Zex was receiving reports that made no sense. His forces had landed successfully on 17 worlds. But Earth was different. The humans weren't running away or surrendering. Instead, they were fighting back with tactics that no civilized species had ever used. They're using their own cities as weapons. One of his commanders reported, they collapse buildings on our soldiers and then disappear underground. They don't fight like proper warriors, and their technology doesn't make sense. Added another commander, they attack our advanced fighters with primitive aircraft. But somehow they're winning. Zex stared at the reports from his command ship, feeling the first stirrings of doubt. The conquest of Earth was supposed to be simple, just like all the others, but the humans were proving to be unlike any enemy the Zephyrians had ever faced. They were creative, unpredictable, and absolutely refused to give up even when they were losing. They found new ways to fight back, and worst of all, they seemed to be getting better at it with each passing hour. For the first time in his career, War Commander Zex began to wonder if the Zephyrian collective had made a terrible mistake. Professor Sam Miller had never worked so hard in his life, but he had never been more excited. The captured Zephyrian technology was spread across his laboratory like pieces of a giant puzzle, and every day he discovered something new that could help humanity fight back. "Look at this," Sam said to his team as he held up a piece of alien armor. "It's incredibly strong, but it has a weakness. The metal becomes brittle when exposed to certain radio frequencies. We can use this against them." His assistant, Dr. Nancy Williams, was examining a Zephyrian energy weapon with a magnifying glass. "Their guns are amazing," she said, "but they're designed to work only with their biology. We can't fire them, but we can take them apart and build our own versions." Sam nodded and picked up another piece of alien technology. "The best part is that they never expected anyone to steal their equipment." He said they didn't build in any protection against reverse engineering. They were so confident that no one could understand their science. In the 3 weeks since the invasion began, Sam's team had learned more about advanced technology than humanity had discovered in the previous 100 years. They worked day and night, taking apart alien devices and figuring out how they worked. "I've got the energy weapon figured out," announced Dr. Pete Johnson from across the lab. "If we modify our power cells and change the focusing crystals, we can make guns that are just as powerful as theirs." Sam smiled and made notes on his tablet. "Good work, Pete. Get the designs to the weapons factories immediately. We need to arm our fighters with something that can punch through alien armor." Meanwhile, in the underground tunnels beneath London, Lieutenant Nina Wells was proving that humans could be just as sneaky as any alien. The former Special Forces operative had spent her career learning how to move without being seen, and now she was using those skills to strike at the heart of the Zephyrian invasion. The aliens set up their command post in the old Parliament building. Nina reported to her team over the radio. "They think it's secure because they have guards posted everywhere, but they don't know about the old Victorian sewers underneath." Nina had been studying the alien occupation forces for 2 weeks, learning their patterns and finding their weaknesses. The Zephyrians were excellent soldiers, but they were used to fighting in open battles against enemies who fought like they did. They had never dealt with someone who could appear from nowhere, strike quickly, and disappear again. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy their whole army," Nina whispered to her squad as they moved through the dark tunnels. "We just need to make them afraid to turn their backs. We want them to waste time looking over their shoulders instead of fighting our main forces." The squad reached a hidden entrance beneath the Parliament building, and Nina carefully opened a secret panel. She could hear alien voices above. Speaking in their harsh language, they sounded confident and relaxed, which was exactly what she wanted. Nina's team had developed a new weapon based on Dr. Amy Sheen's research. It was a small device that could disrupt Zephyrian electronics, but it also did something else that the aliens didn't expect. It made their translator implants stop working. "On my mark," Nina whispered, and her team activated their devices simultaneously. The alien voices above suddenly became confused and panicked as they lost the ability to understand each other in the chaos that followed. Nina's team planted their real weapons, small bombs that would explode later when the aliens thought they were safe. The psychological effect was even more important than the physical damage. The Zephyrians would never feel secure again, even in their own bases across the Atlantic. Dr. Tony Richards was making a discovery that would change the entire war. The medical researcher had been studying captured Zephyrian soldiers, and what he found was both fascinating and terrifying. "They're not as tough as they look," Tony explained to his colleague, Dr. Susan Martinez. "Their immune systems are incredibly specialized. They've never been exposed to Earth bacteria, and their bodies can't handle our microorganisms." Susan looked at the test results on Tony's computer screen. "You mean they're getting sick just from being on our planet?" Tony nodded grimly. "Not just sick, they're dying. The bacteria that live harmlessly in our soil are deadly poison to them. They've been wearing sealed suits to protect themselves, but they can't keep that up forever." The implications were staggering. If the Zephyrians couldn't survive on Earth without protection, then humanity had a weapon that the aliens couldn't defend against. The planet itself was fighting back. "We need to be careful about how we use this information," Tony warned. "If we weaponize our bacteria, we could create something that might hurt us too, but if we're smart about it, we can make the aliens' lives very difficult." In the Mediterranean Sea, Captain Elena Vasquez was opening a completely new front in the war. The submarine commander had realized that the Zephyrians had never encountered underwater warfare, and she was determined to use that advantage. They can track our ships on the surface, Elena explained to her crew, but they have no idea we're down here. Their sensors can't penetrate deep water, and they don't have any underwater vehicles. Elena's submarine had been modified with captured Zephyrian technology, making it faster and more deadly than any underwater vessel in human history. She could strike at alien ships from below, where they least expected it. Target the supply ships first, Elena ordered as her submarine approached an alien convoy. If we can cut off their supplies, their invasion forces will start to weaken. The attack was perfect. Elena's submarine fired modified torpedoes that used Zephyrian energy technology, punching through the alien shields like they were paper. The supply ships exploded one by one, sending vital equipment and food to the bottom of the sea. Unknown vessels attacking from below. The Zephyrian commander reported in panic. We have no defensive weapons that can reach them. Elena smiled as she listened to the alien radio chatter. That's the problem with conquering a water planet, she said to her crew. You should have learned how to swim first. Back in the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Admiral Carter was studying reports from around the world. The news was better than anyone had dared to hope. Humanity was not just surviving the invasion. They were winning. The aliens are retreating from Australia, reported General Kate Ross. Our fighters have made it too expensive for them to hold the desert regions, and the urban warfare is going even better, added Colonel Dave Wilson. Every city they try to occupy becomes a trap. They're losing more soldiers than they're gaining ground. Admiral Carter nodded and looked at the global map on his screen. The red markers showing Zephyrian forces were shrinking every day, while the blue markers showing human resistance were growing stronger. They made a critical error, the Admiral said to his staff. They assumed that primitive meant stupid. But we're not primitive, we're adaptive, and we're proving that sometimes the best technology is the one that solves the problem right in front of you. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the invasion began, humanity was fighting back with real hope. The Zephyrians had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, but they were learning that humans were unlike any enemy they had ever faced, and the hardest lessons were still to come. Admiral Rachel Kim stood on the bridge of the newly built Earth battleship HFY, watching as her fleet moved toward the Zephyrian ships hiding behind the moon. The vessel beneath her feet was unlike anything humanity had ever built before, combining human engineering with captured alien technology to create something that neither species could have made alone. All ships report ready for combat, announced Captain Roy Peterson from the communications station. The lunar colonies have given us the green light to begin the assault. Rachel nodded and studied the tactical display. The Zephyrians had pulled back their forces after suffering heavy losses on Earth, but they were still dangerous. They had called for reinforcements from their homeworlds, and those ships would arrive soon if humanity was going to win this war. They had to strike now while the aliens were still confused and weakened. Launch the first wave, Rachel ordered. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth anymore, we're fighting for the future of our species. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships moved with the unpredictable creativity that had made them so effective on the ground, while alien vessels tried to maintain their traditional formation fighting. The Zephyrians had superior firepower, but the humans had learned to use speed and cunning to even the odds. Engineer Paul Davis watched the battle from the EDS Defiance's engine room, monitoring the hybrid systems that powered the ship. His design combined human fusion reactors with alien energy amplifiers, creating a power source that was both reliable and incredibly strong. Engine output at 120%. Paul reported to the bridge. The alien power crystals are working perfectly with our reactor cores. We're actually getting more energy than either system could produce alone. The battle turned into a deadly dance as human ships darted between the larger alien vessels, striking at weak points and disappearing before the Zephyrians could respond. The aliens tried to use their usual tactics, forming defensive walls and firing concentrated volleys. But the humans refused to fight that way. Captain Susan Blake commanded the assault ship Ed's Thunderbolt, Leading a strike force directly at the Zephyrian command vessel, she had studied every battle report from the ground war, and she knew exactly how to confuse the alien commanders. They expect us to attack from the front, Susan told her crew over the intercom, but we're going to hit them from 6 different directions at once. They won't know where to shoot first. Susan's plan worked perfectly. The human ships split up and approached the command vessel from every angle, forcing the Zephyrians to divide their fire. The alien ship was powerful, but it couldn't defend against attacks coming from everywhere at once. Their shields are weakening, reported Lieutenant Carl Johnson from the weapons station. Another 30 seconds and we'll have a clear shot at their main reactor. But the Zephyrians had one more surprise. The command ship suddenly opened fire with a weapon that humanity had never seen before, a beam of pure energy that could cut through any armor. The blast barely missed the Ed's Thunderbolt, but it completely destroyed a nearby human cruiser. New contact, shouted the sensor operator. Large alien reinforcements arriving. From hyperspace, the Zephyrian reinforcement fleet was twice the size of the original invasion force. Filled with ships that looked even more advanced and dangerous, the alien commanders had finally realized that Earth would not be an easy conquest, and they were bringing everything they had to finish the job. But Rachel Kim was not intimidated. She had been preparing for this moment ever since the war began, and she had a few surprises of her own. Activate the lunar defense platforms, Rachel ordered, and signal the Jupiter stations to begin their approach. The moon suddenly bristled with weapons that the Zephyrians had never seen before. Human engineers had spent months building hidden gun emplacements in the lunar rock, using alien technology to create defensive systems that were invisible until they opened fire. The alien reinforcements flew directly into the trap, expecting to find a defeated human fleet. Instead, they found themselves caught between Rachel's mobile forces and the fixed defenses of the lunar colonies. The battle became a massacre as human weapons, powered by alien energy systems, tore through the Zephyrian ships. Dr. Kevin Turner was watching the battle from his laboratory on Europa. But his real work was just beginning. The psychologist had spent weeks studying captured Zephyrian soldiers, learning how their minds worked and finding ways to use that knowledge as a weapon. Begin the broadcast. Kevin ordered his assistant, Dr. Martha Wilson. Let's see how they handle a little psychological warfare. The transmission that went out to every Zephyrian ship was carefully designed to exploit their deepest fears. Kevin had learned that the aliens were terrified of chaos and unpredictability, so he created a message that would make them question everything they thought they knew about the war. Attention, Zephyrian forces. The broadcast began. You came to our world thinking you were the predators, but now you are the prey. You cannot understand us because we do not think like you. We fight in ways that make no sense to your logical minds, and every day we grow stronger while you grow weaker. The message continued with carefully chosen words that would make the aliens doubt their commanders and fear their human enemies. Kevin had studied 17 different alien species that the Zephyrians had conquered, and he knew exactly what would break their confidence. Your empire has never faced an enemy like humanity. The broadcast concluded, we do not surrender, we do not flee, and we never stop adapting. Every mistake you make teaches us how to defeat you. Your conquest ends here. The effect was immediate. Zephyrian radio chatter became panicked and disorganized as soldiers began to question their orders. Some ships broke formation and tried to retreat, while others fired wildly at shadows. The disciplined alien war machine was falling apart on the bridge of the EDS Defiance. Rachel watched as the tide of battle turned completely in humanity's favor. The Zephyrian reinforcements were scattered and confused, their ships fleeing in all directions while human forces pursued them relentlessly. Ma'am, we're receiving surrender signals from 3 alien vessels, reported Captain Peterson. They're requesting permission to abandon their ships and surrender to our forces. Rachel smiled grimly. It was the first time in the war that Zephyrian soldiers had surrendered, and she knew it would not be the last. The aliens were finally beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake when they decided to attack Earth. Accept their surrender, Rachel ordered, and send a message to Admiral Carter. Tell him that the space battle is won and we're ready to take the fight to the enemy. The battle around the moon lasted for 6 more hours, But the outcome was never in doubt. Human forces had learned to fight in space just as effectively as they fought on the ground, using creativity and determination to overcome superior technology when the last Zephyrian ship finally retreated toward deep space. Rachel looked at the wreckage floating around the moon and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Humanity had won its first major space battle, but the cost had been high. Many brave men and women had died to protect their world. Signal all ships. Rachel announced, "We've proven that humans can fight in space just as well as we fight on land, but this is just the beginning. The Zephyrians will be back, and next time we'll be ready for them." The war had entered a new phase. Humanity was no longer just defending Earth. They were preparing to take the fight to the enemy. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Fleet Admiral Chris Thompson stood in the command center of the massive human starship Ed's Vengeance, watching as his fleet emerged from hyperspace above the alien world of Kepler Prime. The planet below was covered in crystalline cities that sparkled like jewels, but Chris knew that those beautiful structures housed millions of slaves from a dozen different species. "Sir, we're detecting massive orbital defenses," reported Commander Linda Brooks from the tactical station. "The Zephyrians have built weapons platforms all around the planet." Chris nodded and studied the display. The alien defenses were impressive, but they were designed to fight enemies who attacked the way the Zephyrians expected. Human forces had learned to be unpredictable, and today they would use that advantage to free an entire world. "Launch the liberation pods," Chris ordered. "Let's give the people down there some hope." Thousands of small capsules shot from the human ships toward the planet's surface. Each pod contained weapons, medical supplies, and communication equipment for the enslaved populations. Chris had learned from intercepted Zephyrian transmissions that many species on the conquered worlds were planning rebellions. They just needed someone to give them the tools to fight back. Dr. Helen Wright was aboard one of the ships in Chris's fleet, but her mission was different from the others. The xenorchaeologist had spent months studying captured Zephyrian records, and she had made a discovery that could change everything. "I found the pattern," Helen explained to Chris over the video link. "The Zephyrians have been using the same conquest strategy for over 200 years. They attack a world with overwhelming force, crush all resistance in the first few days, and then set up occupation governments." She paused and brought up a chart on her screen. "But here's the important part. They've never had to deal with a long war. Their entire military doctrine is based on quick victories. If we can drag this conflict out and force them to fight on multiple fronts, their system will collapse." Chris smiled as he listened to Helen's analysis. It confirmed what he had suspected for weeks. The Zephyrians were like a house of cards. They looked strong from the outside, but they would fall apart if someone pushed them in the right places. "How many worlds are in open rebellion?" Chris asked his intelligence officer. "Captain Jenny Walsh, 17 systems have declared independence in the last month." Jenny reported, "The crystalline entities of Proxima b were the first to join us, and now the Aquatic Confederacy of Kepler 442 billion is sending ships to help with the attack." The alliance that humanity had built was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of conquering the species they liberated, humans offered them partnership and respect. The former slaves were eager to fight alongside their liberators, and their knowledge of Zephyrian weaknesses was invaluable. Colonel Danny Martinez was leading the ground assault on Kepler Prime, but his army was not made up of only humans. The Liberation Force included fighters from 6 different species, all united by their hatred of Zephyrian oppression. "Remember, our goal is to free the civilian population," Danny told his mixed force of humans and aliens. "The Zephyrians will try to use the slaves as shields, but we have friends down there who are ready to help us." The landing was unlike any military operation in galactic history. Human dropships landed alongside vessels from the crystalline entities, while Aquatic Confederacy fighters provided air support. The Zephyrian defenders had never faced such a diverse army, and their tactics were useless against enemies who thought in completely different ways. "The crystalline fighters are immune to energy weapons," reported Lieutenant Mark Davis from the battlefield, "and the aquatic forces can breathe in the Zephyrian atmosphere without protection. They're fighting in environments where we would need special equipment." Danny watched as his alien allies proved their worth. The crystalline entities could walk through Zephyrian energy barriers like they were made of air, while the aquatic Confederacy forces moved through the alien cities like flowing water, appearing and disappearing in ways that confused the Defender's intelligence officer. Lisa Garcia was coordinating with resistance movements across the planet, and the reports she received were better than anyone had hoped. The enslaved populations had been planning their uprising for years, waiting for someone to give them the weapons and support they needed. The rebellion is spreading faster than we expected, Lisa reported to Danny. The Zephyrians are losing control of their slave camps, and many of their own guards are switching sides. The most surprising allies were the reformed Zephyrian colonies. Groups of aliens who had grown tired of their empire's endless wars. These Zephyrians had been living on the edges of their territory for decades, and they saw the human alliance as a chance to build something better. "We have been waiting for someone like you," explained Commander Vex, a reformed Zephyrian who had joined the human fleet. "Our people have forgotten that there are other ways to live besides conquest and domination. You humans have shown us that strength can be used to protect instead of destroy." The battle for Kepler Prime lasted 3 days, but the outcome was never in doubt. The combined human and alien forces moved through the planet like an unstoppable wave, freeing slave camps and destroying Zephyrian installations. The defenders tried to use their traditional tactics, but they were overwhelmed by enemies who fought in ways they had never seen before. "The planetary government is requesting terms for surrender," reported Commander Brooks from the EDS Vengeance. "They're offering to evacuate all Zephyrian forces if we promise not to pursue them." Chris considered the offer for a moment, then shook his head. "Tell them we'll accept the evacuation of civilian administrators and non-combat personnel," he said, "but all military forces will be taken as prisoners of war. We can't let them regroup and attack other worlds." The liberation of Kepler Prime sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian Empire. For the first time in their history, they had lost an entire world to a rebellion. The news spread to every corner of their territory, inspiring uprisings on dozens of other planets back in Zephyrian space. War Commander Zex was facing a crisis that his people had never experienced before. The reports from across the Empire painted a picture of total collapse. Worlds that had been peaceful for decades were suddenly in open revolt, and the Zephyrian military was stretched too thin to respond to all the threats. "The humans have started something that we cannot stop," Zex admitted to his council. "They have shown our slaves that resistance is possible, and now our entire empire is falling apart." The other commanders argued and shouted, but Zex knew the truth. The Zephyrian collective had built their power on fear and overwhelming force. But humans had proven that determination and creativity could overcome any advantage. The empire was crumbling from within, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "Perhaps it is time to consider peace negotiations," suggested one of the younger commanders. "The humans have shown mercy to our people who surrender. Maybe we can find a way to end this war without losing everything." Zex looked around the room at his fellow officers. These were the same beings who had conquered 17 star systems without losing a single battle. But now they were talking about surrender. The humans had broken something fundamental in the Zephyrian way of thinking, and there was no going back. "Contact the human fleet," Zex ordered reluctantly. "Tell them that the Zephyrian collective is willing to discuss terms for ending this conflict." The message was sent across space toward the human forces, carrying with it the admission that the once mighty Zephyrian Empire had been defeated by a species they had thought was primitive. The hunters had become the hunted, and now they were ready to accept whatever mercy their former prey might offer. President Lauren Smith stood in the great hall of the former Zephyrian Capitol building on their homeworld of Zephyr Prime, watching as the last alien officials signed the surrender documents. The massive chamber that had once echoed with the planning of galactic conquest was now silent except for the quiet scratching of pens on paper with this signature. "The Zephyrian Collective formally surrenders all territorial claims and agrees to the establishment of the Galactic Cooperation Council," announced Ambassador Frank Johnson as he read from the treaty the veteran diplomat had spent months negotiating. The terms that would reshape the entire galaxy. The surrender had come faster than anyone expected. Once the Zephyrian Empire began losing worlds, the collapse accelerated like a landslide. Rebellions erupted on every planet, and the alien military found itself fighting dozens of wars at once. Their forces were spread too thin. Their supplies were cut off and their morale was broken. General Patricia Lee commanded the occupation forces that had taken control of Zephyrian space. But her job was different from any military occupation in history. Instead of crushing the defeated enemy, her orders were to help them build a new society based on cooperation instead of conquest. The transition is going better than expected, Patricia reported to President Smith. Most of the Zephyrian civilians are actually relieved that the war is over. They were tired of sending their children to fight in endless campaigns. The former slaves were the most eager to help with the reconstruction. Millions of beings from dozens of species had been freed from Zephyrian labor camps, and many of them had skills that were desperately needed. The galaxy was learning to work together for the first time in centuries. Dr. Stephen Kumar was leading the cultural exchange program, helping different species understand each other and find ways to cooperate. The anthropologist had discovered that most of the conflicts in the galaxy came from misunderstandings rather than real hatred. The crystalline entities communicate through light patterns. Stephen explained to a group of human and Zephyrian students, what looks like an aggressive display to us is actually their way of showing friendship once you understand their language. They're some of the kindest beings in the galaxy. The program was working better than anyone had hoped. Former enemies were learning to see each other as individuals rather than threats, and new friendships were forming across species lines. The galaxy was becoming a more peaceful place as understanding replaced fear. The war crimes trials were more difficult. President Smith had insisted that the worst Zephyrian leaders be held accountable for their actions. But she also wanted to show mercy to those who were willing to change. Many of the alien commanders had been following orders their whole lives and had never questioned whether conquest was right or wrong. War Commander Zex has agreed to testify against the High Council in exchange for a reduced sentence, Frank Johnson reported. He says he wants to help prevent future wars by explaining how the Zephyrian military machine really worked. The trials revealed the true scope of Zephyrian crimes. Millions of beings had died in their conquests, and entire species had been enslaved for generations. But the trials also showed that many individual Zephyrians had been victims of their own system, forced to fight wars they didn't believe in. President Smith watched the proceedings with mixed feelings. She was glad that justice was being served, but she also felt sorry for the ordinary Zephyrians who had been caught up in their empire's madness. The important thing was to make sure that nothing like this could happen again. The new constitution is ready for final approval, announced Dr. Sarah Taylor, the legal expert who had been drafting the founding documents of the Galactic Cooperation Council. Every species will have equal representation, and all decisions about war and peace must be made by majority vote. The new government was based on human democratic principles, but it had been adapted to work with dozens of different species. Some aliens preferred to make decisions as a group, while others chose individual representatives. The system was complex, but it gave everyone a voice in shaping their future. The economic reconstruction was equally challenging. The Zephyrian Empire had been built on slave labor and forced tribute, but the new galaxy would be based on free trade and mutual benefit. Human economists worked with alien experts to create a system that would help all species prosper. The former slave worlds are actually becoming some of our most productive partners, reported economic advisor Tom Wilson. They have resources and skills that complement our own, and they're eager to trade freely instead of having their wealth stolen. The transformation was remarkable. Worlds that had been oppressed for centuries were suddenly experiencing freedom and prosperity. The galaxy was discovering that cooperation was much more profitable than conquest. As the months passed, humanity found itself in an unexpected role instead of being the conquerors. They had become the peacekeepers. Their military was the strongest in the galaxy, but they used that strength to protect the weak rather than dominate them. We never wanted to rule the galaxy, President Smith explained to a gathering of alien leaders. We just wanted to live in peace, but if we have to be the guardians of that peace, then we'll do our duty. The other species accepted human leadership because they had seen how humans treated their former enemies with justice and mercy. The galaxy had learned that strength without compassion was tyranny. But strength guided by wisdom could protect freedom. Admiral Rachel Kim was now in charge of the Galactic Defense Force, a new military organization that included ships and personnel from every member species. The fleet was designed to prevent any future attempts at galactic conquest. Our job is not to win wars, Rachel told her diverse crew. Our job is to prevent wars from starting in the first place. We show strength so that others don't have to fight. The new era was not without challenges. Some species were reluctant to give up their old ways, and there were still conflicts over resources and territory. But the Galactic Cooperation Council provided a way to resolve disputes peacefully, and the threat of human intervention kept most potential aggressors in line. Dr. Kevin Turner was working on a project to preserve the lessons of the war. He was creating educational programs that would teach future generations about the dangers of unchecked aggression and the benefits of cooperation. The Zephyrians thought they could conquer humanity because we looked weak, Kevin explained to his students, but they learned that appearances can be deceiving. The most dangerous enemy is often the one you underestimate. Years later, historians would debate exactly why humanity had been so successful against such overwhelming odds. Some pointed to human creativity and adaptability, while others emphasized the power of unity and determination, but most agreed that the real secret was something simpler. Humans refused to give up. They fought when fighting was necessary. They adapted when adaptation was required, and they showed mercy when mercy was earned. They proved that a species didn't need to be the biggest or strongest to change the galaxy. They just needed to be willing to stand up for what was right. The galaxy was at peace for the first time in centuries, and humanity had learned an important lesson. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they had a responsibility to use their strength wisely. The age of conquest was over, and the age of cooperation had begun. The Zephyrians had thought they could conquer humanity, but they had discovered something far more powerful than military might. They had encountered a species that would rather die fighting than live as slaves, and that determination had changed everything. In the end, the aliens were right about one thing: they really didn't last long, but not in the way they had expected. Instead of quickly conquering Earth, they had quickly learned that some things in the universe were worth fighting for, and humans would never stop defending them.